Heroes created by people's imagination live and commit their acts of bravery in our program, The Legend of Kazakhs. Legends are an invaluable cultural heritage passed down from generation to generation. Plenty of secrets are hidden in the history of the Kazakh people. These moments when you realize that once there were ancient civilizations on this land that left a great cultural and historical heritage are so moving. The continuity of generations ensures the preservation of national customs and rituals, the centuries-old experience of the nation. Since the dawn of antiquity to the present day, people came up with legends about everything that surrounds them. Connoisseurs of ancient customs and traditions carefully preserved in their memory the legends heard from their grandparents and great-grandparents. The content of these narratives reflects the moral values and history of our nation. Today, we will tell you about one of the main attractions of the State National Natural Park, Altyn Emil, about the royal mounds, Besshatyr, which was erected in honor of Saka rulers. In ancient times, the people wanted a more reliable isolation of the deceased from the world of the living, and therefore themselves from the world of the dead. Therefore, funeral ceremonies were of great significance and had a profound sacred meaning. The legend of the mounds Besshatyr will allow you to get to know the history of the nomadic people a little better. A large tribe once lived in the vast lands between the ridges of the Alatau and Karatau. This was a powerful and very rich tribe. At the head of the tribe was Kazakh Batyr, who, along with his 9 sons, defended his land from the raids of hostile tribes. Kazakh buried 4 brave sons in those battles, and he raised up 4 mounds in their honor. And once the family of Batyr Kazakh was joined by another son, a boy with a long strand of golden hair, so they called him Altyn Aydar. The parents were proud of his youngest son, and they brought him up as a bold, courageous, and strong boy. From an early age, Altyn Aydar rode on horseback, and every time he participated in a horse race, he won. It was as if he rode on a horse with wings. For many years, the tribes lived happily without troubles. It has been so long since the enemy attacked their land, but out of nowhere, sad news came from the east that the enemy is approaching along the Joly River. A myriad of army troops are spread out on the ground like black soot. They're like locusts crawling to the borders. And the people knew that they would lose everything: water, pasture, and country. The children would be turned into slaves, daughters concubines, and wives would become widows in black. The people decided to get together to discuss what they should do. They made a decision together. Let's go out and meet the enemy. We will not let them into our land. And as usual, Batyr Kazakh headed a numerous army. Altyn Aydar and his 5 older brothers joined their father. Kazakh had formidable troops. The riders were dressed in iron chainmail and steel helmets, and they were armed with sharp swords and sabers, long lances, and powerful bows. Kazakh was accompanied by his youngest son, The young Besshatyr was sitting astride a golden sledge, whose name was Kulansari. Altan Idar was dressed in golden armor. His head was protected by a helmet. His chest and back were covered by gold chainmail, and his waist was pulled together by a golden belt, decorated with golden buckles and with the images of a wolf's head. The legs were encased in tall, pointed boots of a golden skin. When he led his horse division towards the hundreds of enemies, his golden clothes sparkled under the sun. Altan Idar always showed himself in the battle boldly and fiercely, courageously walking towards the enemy, setting an example for the other Besshatyrs. And people nicknamed him the Golden Warrior. The enemies, seeing this brave young man, always at the front of the battle, ordered their most apt archer to do whatever they could to kill him. The archer rubbed his longest and sharpest arrow with poison and took its most powerful bow, taking aim at Altan Idar. The arrow hit the young man's hand, but bounced off of the armor of the Besshatyr, only slightly scratching the hand of the young Besshatyr. Seeing that, his father sent a detachment of his best warriors to the place where the enemy archer was. In an instant, the archer's hands were cut off with a sharp sword. For many days, the squads of Kazakhs were fighting the hordes of the enemies. 3 times they came together in bloody battles, but they did not let the enemy in. After numerous battles, the invaders announced to Kazakhs and his sons that they recognized defeat and agreed to a truce. Kazakhs thought for a while and agreed. His defeated enemies retreated. The winners returned home from war. Everyone rested for a couple of days, and in the 3rd day, in honor of the victory of the Besshatyrs, they started a horse racing and other equestrian games. They chose the place for the race, and the people began to flock to the mountain. 20 riders lined up at the start, fast horses under them, waiting impatiently. Altan Idar, in his golden robe, sat proudly on his horse, Kulansari. And on cue, the riders raced forward. There was a huge circle that they had to gallop around the mountain, stretching from horizon to horizon. Altan Idar on his horse came after the first 2 riders, saving strength for the final push. Once completed the first round, Altan Idar decided to act. He spurred his horse and went to overtake the riders, and his horse quickly and deftly beat his opponents. People saw that the horsemen in golden robes surpassed everyone at the race. And when Altan Idar had outscored his opponents, the poison of the arrow, which had grazed his hand, started to affect him. He felt dizzy, his muscles weakened, and he lost consciousness. The horse continued to fly like an arrow, ahead only its tail waving in the wind. The clever horse, without reducing his speed, first crossed the finish line. When Kulansari's horse stopped, the horseman's lifeless body fell to the ground. People on the hill exclaimed, "What happened to our most brave Besshatyr? The horse decided to ride to the victory. This has never happened." And then the crowd let the father, Kazakhs, run to his son, lying on the ground. Altan Idar came to consciousness for a moment, and with his white lips he whispered to his father, "Father, I fell off the horse. Don't worry, my son, you've won." The whole steppe nation bitterly mourned him. His father built a mound at that spot where the poisoned arrow killed his son. His son was injured, and because of the ancient customs of nomads, in the place where he died, a warrior's burial mound was erected. He was buried in a golden gown, and next to him in the grave, a silver cup was placed, in which his father scratched the inscription, "You left us too early to the future." From grief and anguish, soon Kazakhs died himself. In his testament, he erected a mound near the mounds. where his 4 sons were buried, and thus formed the mounds Besshatyr. On the northern shore of Kapchagai Reservoir, on the territory of the national park Altyn Emel, there is a unique burial complex called Besshatyr. Kazakhstan's land is rich in historical and archaeological sites of global significance. One of these monuments is the necropolis Besshatyr, or 5 tents. Thousands of years ago, Besshatyr was a place of worship of the ancient Sacs, who lived in the territory of Kazakhstan. It is dated to the 5th or 4th centuries BC, when tribes of the Saka Tigrahauda lived. The ancient nomads had a custom where the mound's height and diameter corresponded to the position of the dead man and his family in society. The necropolis consisted of 31 mounds. This burial and memorial complex were built of stone. They usually consisted of 3 parts: a large mound, a small mound, and a stone walkway in the form of half arches. The stratification of the mounds allowed to maintain a microclimate inside the burial mound and shape the monument. In the countryside, where there was a huge royal mound called Besshatyr, in the course of the centuries, the Sakas came to worship and brought numerous sacrifices. They also had various religious ceremonies and organized commemorations. According to legends, the stone pillars and boulders arranged spirals around the mounds, standing on the border of the 2 worlds, the world where the people lived and the world inhabited by the gods. The religious buildings of Besshatyr reflected the desire of people to memorialize their leader. During the construction of the mounds, the aim was to make it out of reach for defilement and robbery, and the eternal strength. According to the beliefs of the Sacs, a monument in its grandeur had to match the power and wealth of the leader, to inspire respect and fear of subsequent generations. The monumental mounds of Besshatyr make a great impression. After all, only for the construction of a large mound, more than 50,000 cubic meters of soil were used, stone, rubble. In addition, about thousands of stone slabs and boulders were brought from the surrounding mountains. In the next program, we will tell you about the amazing phenomenon of nature, of the singing dunes, which are famous for the fact that they emit a sound like a pipe organ. The legend tells us about how the dunes were formed, about the sad love between a boy and a girl, and about an evil shaitan who intrigued people, and how he once angered God.